Good afternoon, everyone. Country Flyboy here, and today we're going to get a little bit more advanced with these basic flight sim tutorials. Alright, so I'm in a multi-engine airplane this time, mostly because I wanted to be. I got tired of the Cessna, and I wanted to show you something a little different. Notice the information in the multi-engine plane on the gauges and whatnot. It's all the same stuff, it's just got a different depiction. A few extra gauges too, and a few extra toys for us to play with. Alright, so here's the scenario. We're on a decently long cross-country flight, and we're about halfway done with it, and we look down at our fuel gauges and we notice we've burned more fuel than we thought we would. So we don't have enough fuel to continue all the way down to Key West, so we need to look for a place to fuel up. If we bring up the GPS and hit the nearest function, it will default to the nearest airport, which is what we want. So I'm going to bring up the cursor, and I can see St. Augustine is the second closest airfield. St. Augustine, Florida, 10-foot elevation. They have avgas services available. Alright, so I'm on a flight plan, however. How could I navigate to St. Augustine for landing to get fuel without interrupting my flight plan? If I hit direct GPS, it cancels my flight plan and I'd have to reload it. Well, what I can do is tune the St. Augustine VOR. We can see that the SGJ St. Augustine VOR is right on the field. So if I go nearest again, and then using the small knob, scroll over to VORs, we can see St. Augustine VOR is the closest. It's on 109.4. Now watch this. If I push the cursor button, highlight that VOR and hit enter, it sends me to the VOR information page. So we can see St. Augustine is in region K7, variation is 6 degrees west, there's its position. WX broadcast is not replicated in Flight Sim. But if I hit cursor again, then select the frequency, and then push enter, it sends that frequency, 109.4, to the NAV2 standby. So now all I gotta do is click it over, and we can tune the VOR to see if we're getting its, we would have to look at a chart to see if we're getting the Morse code, so let's just listen to the Morse code real quick. Okay, that is St. Augustine VOR, and DME says we're 7.5 miles away from it. If we look at our window, we can see St. Augustine right over there. Alright, so now what? Well, we need to start descending the plane, for one. So I'm going to turn off Autopilot real quick. We'll bring the throttle back. Let the plane descend. I'm going to bring the RPM back. And we're just going to let the plane descend. And I'm going to switch the navigation source mode over to nav so we can follow the VOR. Okay, so to work with VORs, you need to set a course to the station. Alright, so we can see we're on that radial right there. We just crossed it. That was about 085. Let's set 070, and we want to track inbound on the 070 radial. We can see we're 7.6 miles out. So we need to contact tower. I don't know tower's frequency. Well, I can do this. If I go over to the information page again, we can see St. Augustine's already selected because it's the closest airfield. Go to their frequency pages, then highlight the frequency I need, which is tower, hit enter, it sends it to my COM1 standby. So now I just gotta flip that over, go to the ATC menu, select it from the ATC menu, and you could use auto tune from here, but since I've tuned it already with the GPS, it's already tuned. Now I just gotta select full stop landing because we need to get some fuel.
November 71 Foxtrot Sierra, is 7 miles southwest with Zulu to land. Beach November 71
landing lights on.
Sierra, Augustine Tower, enter left downwind, runway 31, altimeter 2992. Enter left traffic, runway 31, Beach 1 Foxtrot Sierra.
Okay, we don't have the weather information at St. Augustine yet. We need to get that. So if we go back and look at the GPS, we want to tune ATIS into the COM2. We cannot auto-tune that without switching to the radio, so we'll have to manually tune ATIS into COM2, 119.63. And we'll just listen to it real quick.
St. Augustine Airport information, Zulu 1722 Zulu. Wind calm. Visibility greater than 20 miles. Sky conditions clear. Temperature 15, dew point 5. Altimeter 29902. ILS runway 31 in use. Landing and departing runway 31. Yep.
Okay, 31 is the runway in use. We've been told to enter the downwind for that, so real quick I'm going to do some maneuvering to get us over there. Enter the downwind for runway 31. So we want to descend to traffic pattern altitude, and when you don't know traffic pattern altitude, it's usually 1,000 feet above field elevation. So we saw the elevation of St. Augustine earlier was pretty much sea level, so we can assume 1,000 feet on the altimeter is traffic pattern altitude. It's almost always going to be 1,000 feet above field elevation unless published otherwise. Alright, so now we're going to enter the downwind for runway 31. Level off at 1,000 feet and let the speed bleed off. What we're going to do is we're going to land, and once we land, we'll request taxi to the fueling station so we can fuel the aircraft up. Then we'll be back on our way. So we're not stopping here really. We're just stopping off for a quick bit of gas. Alright. Set the RPMs to full. Mixture to full.
November 7-1 Foxtrot Sierra. Wind calm. Cleared to land runway 31.
Alright, first notch of flaps.
Cleared to land runway 31. Beach 1.
We're below VLE, so I can raise the gear, or lower the gear, sorry. Been cleared to land. I don't want to get into the specifics of multi-engine flying, but I'll go ahead and give you this quick tip. When you're flying in the pattern with a multi-engine airplane and you're on the descent and approach part of it, keep your speed no slower than blue line, which is about 100 knots in this plane, but no faster than top of the wide arc. Alright, a little to the right of the runway. Now turn your attention to that row of lights off to the left of the runway. That is called the PAPI. And that stands for Precision Approach Path Indicator. That tells us if we're too high or too low. As you see, we got 3 white lights. That indicates we're slightly above the proper glide path. There's 2 white and 2 red. That's what you want to see. That indicates that you are on the glide path. Flaps full. And of course 3 reds like that means you're too low. 4 reds means you're dangerously low. Alright, so here we come in the runway. Throttle to idle. Alrighty. We'll just let the speed bleed off. We'll exit the runway on that taxiway up there. Okay, so to reiterate, to fly to a VOR, you need to set the inbound radial to the VOR. And the course deviation indicator, or CDI, will tell you if you're too far left or right of the course. That line right there, you want to center it up. Centering it up means you're on course. So basically, what you want to see is the arrow pointing to the top of the CDI here, and you want to see that line centered. Keep in mind, the closer you get to the VOR station, the more sensitive that's going to be. Okay, so we're going to request taxi to fuel.
November 7-1 Foxtrot Sierra, request taxi to fuel. 1 Foxtrot Sierra, taxi to fuel.
Alright.
Taxi to fuel, Beach 1 Foxtrot Sierra.
We've been been told to taxi to fuel. They didn't give us a taxi route, so we can just head straight there. I don't really know where the fuel station is on this airport, so I'm going to just turn on Progressive Taxi. Again, Progressive Taxi, very useful if you don't know your way around an airport. And we'll just follow this red line, takes us all the way to the fuel station. Looks like it's at the base of the tower over there. Alright, we'll take a slight right turn here. Alright, there's the fuel station right over there. Now, pretty much all airports in Flight Simulator have a fuel station somewhere. Very few of them don't. Now, to use the fuel station, all you have to do is taxi up to it and park the airplane. Unlike in real life, you don't have to shut down the engines, get out, and fuel it up yourself. So we'll just park the airplane. And you can see our fuel gauges are filling up. We'll just sit here until they indicate full. Okay, and they're full. Now, in real life, you'd actually have to get out, shut down the plane, and fill it up yourself. Not necessarily in that order, but yeah, this is what's called self-service fuel. If I was over there in the parking area, where you see those planes are over there, I could also request a fuel truck. Again, not all Flight Simulator airports have the fuel truck available. Not all of them do. That's called full-service fuel. The benefits of that is the fuel truck comes to you, and you can set a precise amount of fuel. The drawbacks of that, well, full-service fuel is more expensive. Not that we have to worry about prices in Flight Simulator. Alright, so we'll just taxi out, and we'll get right up to this taxiway here, then request taxi for takeoff. Alrighty, so we're ready to go. Request taxi for takeoff, VFR to the south.
Augustine ground, Beach, November 7-1 Foxtrot Sierra with Alpha. Request taxi to the active south departure.
Beach, November 7-1 Foxtrot Sierra, taxi to and hold short of runway 31 via taxiway Delta Charlie. Contact tower on 127.625 when ready.
Taxi to and hold short runway 31 via taxiway Delta Charlie. Beach 1 Foxtrot Sierra.
Delta Charlie, that Piper's already tasked. I thought I heard him, but he's over there. Alrighty, so now we want to take off and get back on our flight plan. So we need to set the VOR to navigate back to our course. If we look at the main navigation page, we can see a reciprocal of our current heading would work, which the VOR is basically already on. So if I just set that, we want that arrow to be pointing down, which indicates we're flying away from the VOR. So basically, let me tune tower real quick. What we want to see is that arrow pointing the course we want to fly, the yellow arrow here, and then this yellow bar will indicate if we're too far left or right of the course. Now this white arrow here indicates whether or not we're tracking to or away from the station. So it's to or from. And you can get your distance from the station either from the DME here on the radio. This aircraft has a second DME set up right here. Alright, so landing and strobe lights are on. Request takeoff.
St. Augustine Tower, Beach, November 7-1 Foxtrot Sierra, runway 31, ready for takeoff, south departure. Beach, November 7-1 Foxtrot Sierra, short, runway 31, traffic is Piper departure on the runway.
That Piper Archer had to go full length, didn't he? Bastard. I'm in a hurry and he wants to use the full length of the runway. If you're wondering why we're not over there, if you see this line right here, this is the hold short line. You never want to taxi past that line unless you have takeoff clearance. So at this airport, the hold short line's actually over here. That Piper Archer used full length.
Beach November 71 Foxtrot Sierra. Line up and wait, runway 31. Line up and wait, Beach 1 Foxtrot Sierra.
So I'm just going to taxi. I'm not going to use full length because I don't really need it. I'm just going to go ahead and get on the runway from here. This is what's called an intersecting taxiway departure, where you don't go full length all the way down the runway, you take off from a taxiway somewhere down the runway. As you can see, we're still here at 1,000 foot markings, these white squares here.
Contact Jacksonville departure on 120.75.
These white squares are the 1,000 foot markers, so we only ate up 1,000 foot of the runway. Although this runway does have a displaced threshold.
71 Foxtrot Sierra. Clear to take off, runway 31. Wind calm, south departure approved. Fly runway heading to 500 feet and proceed on course. Clear for takeoff.
Alright, winds are calm, we've been clear for takeoff, we've been told to fly runway heading to 500 feet and then proceed on course. Alrighty, so just like the Cessna, we'll give it full throttle and wait for the speed to get to the takeoff speed. There's red line, we'll start pitching back. And we get airborne just before blue line. Alrighty, want to climb out just above the blue line speed. Unable to land on the remaining runway. Raise the gear. Fly runway heading until 500 feet as ATC instructed. There's 500 feet. We can go ahead and make a left turn on course now. Okay, so we want to intercept the VOR radial that we've selected to fly outbound, which is about 250. So 250 will be our final heading once we're on the radial. I'm going to fly 210 or we'll go 220 or 215 since we're so close to the VOR. Again, VOR is more sensitive the closer you are to it, so you got to take that into account. Now, what you're going to see here, the VOR needle is going to come alive, as we say, meaning this CDI indication is going to start moving.
Beach 1 Foxtrot Sierra, you are leaving my airspace. Frequency change approved.
Alright, frequency change is approved. We'll just switch back to the unused frequency. And we're waiting for this CDI indication to come alive. We'll climb back up to 4,500 where we were earlier. There it is. Wait till it's about halfway down, then we'll make the right turn to get on course. So basically, what we want to do is just center that up and then fly on the arrow, basically. So you'll see this, it's about centered up. Once it centers, I'm going to turn the aircraft to the right a little bit more to get the arrow pointing straight up, and then we'll be on course. And then from there on, we just want to make small corrections to our heading to keep that radial centered up. Okay, and we are now on the 250 radial outbound from the St. Augustine VOR. And we'll fly this radial until we intercept our GPS course. How are we going to know that we've intercepted our GPS course? Well, unfortunately, we have no other way to know than to just look at the GPS. If you look at the GPS, it has its own CDI down here at the bottom, but it's driven by the GPS itself, so this is not your VOR radial here. It's almost centered too, so I'm going to select my GPS course of 181. Now it's going to throw our CDI off, but that's okay. There's 181 right there. I'm going to select nav source to GPS. And now it's just like flying on the VORs. So I'll just center that CDI up. And then we'll fly that course. Now with GPS, the to from indication is always going to show a to indication. There's 4,000 feet. Alright, so basically, to reiterate, to use the navigation radios, you need to make sure your navigation source switch is set to nav. You can find this on pretty much any default plane. It's always on there somewhere. It'll be a switch or a button that says nav GPS. You usually have some form of indication that it's on nav or GPS too, but I don't see one on this airplane. We want GPS in this case. And for GPS course, you need to have a course in the GPS. You can have the direct flight plan like we showed in the first video, or you can have a flight plan filed like we showed in the ATC video. Alright, we'll level off at 5,500. I said 4,000, but we've passed it. We'll go ahead and make it 5,500. Now, the nice thing about having the GPS navigation mode is you can actually use the autopilot to fly it. So, on a long cross-country like this, we're heading all the way down to Key West. That's about an hour and a half worth of flying from where we're at right now. So, yeah. We don't want to sit at the computer that whole time, so we can actually use the autopilot to do it. We'll level off. And now I'll tell the autopilot to do stuff. I'll hit the AP button first, which will enable roll and attitude hold. I'll hit nav, which will enable the autopilot to fly on the selected nav source. It can also fly VOR radials. And we'll select altitude hold. Now it will hold whatever altitude we have set in this window right here, in this case 5,500. So now the autopilot is going to fly me on my GPS course and maintain 5,500. If I wanted to climb or descend, I just needed to adjust that altitude selection to the altitude I wanted it to hold. Alright, we're cruising, so we'll set the mixtures for a good fuel flow. Full throttle cruise, prop is set. And you can also get the autopilot to fly VOR radials simply the same way. Set your radial. Just note the VOR is always going to want to fly the radial to the station. So if you want to fly from the station, you have to set the outbound radial. That doesn't really matter with this airplane, because if you see we have this indication here, we can just set the radial to the station and the autopilot knows which one we want based on this arrow here, the to from indication. That probably sounds really confusing. That's because it kind of is. Again, I want you to read the stuff in the Learning Center and fly the flying lessons in the Learning Center. Rod Machado can do a hell of a better job of explaining it than I can. So definitely check that stuff out when it comes to VOR navigation. GPS navigation is really simple, but I probably just confused you in this tutorial. But I hope I've given you enough information to get you started, at the very least how to read the indications and set radio frequencies. Again, you can manually tune frequencies, you can use auto-tune with the ATC window, or you can even use the GPS to tune frequencies as we saw earlier. Again, to tune a frequency, just select the airport in your information page, find its frequency page, and there are none for this airport. Just find the airport in your page here in the information page, and then get its frequency page, push the cursor, select the frequency you want, and then hit enter. And that will automatically send the frequency to your COM1 standby. It will not send it to COM2. And it works on the nav radios too, but it only uses nav 1. Then all you gotta do is switch the frequency over and you're good to go. And that works with any airplane with a GPS like this. This is the GPS 500. On the next video, I'll possibly select an airplane that has the handheld GPS, the GPS 295. That trick won't work with that GPS because This here is an integrated GPS, meaning although you can't see it on the real life airplane, this is actually built into the panel. But the handheld GPS is not connected to the aircraft's avionics system, so it cannot auto-tune frequencies like that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.